When I was asked to share racial injustice experiences, I had no idea it would be this difficult to do. Feelings and emotions that had long been, I thought, buried resurfaced as if they were just happening. I remember some 60 years ago, I was 7 years old. Returning from a visit with relatives, my parents and I were passing Kittyland Park, amusement park. I saw all the pretty lights and the carnival like rides. It looked like so much fun. I said to my parents, I want to go there. That's where I want to go. You got to take me there. That looks like so much fun. I can remember some hesitation in their responses. My mother responded, You cannot go to Kittyland amusement park. My response immediately was, Why? Why can't I go? I see other children there. My dad then explained that only white people are allowed to go there to Kittyland. Again, I asked, Why? Am I not good enough to go there? My parents both responded, Don't you ever let anybody tell you that you're not good enough. You are good. You are the best. But this is the law. It's not right and it's not fair, but this is the law. Well, I could just see the sad expressions on my parents' face. And my heart sank, and I was so disappointed. We never discussed this situation or this event anymore after that. Even after desegregation and integration, I never went to Kittyland amusement park. I often asked myself, when did some white people decide that they were entitled and superior to Black people? Why do some white people dislike us so much that they're willing to harm us or kill us? These are questions I hope that can be answered honestly. So I challenge each one of you to step up, speak up, make a difference. The one thing that I do know is sure is God is still in charge.
As a person of faith, I've been doing a lot of self examination about racism and my own personal participation in it. I grew up in post segregation Birmingham, Alabama. I went to an integrated school. My first school friend was an African American classmate. I participated in sports that were integrated. But the secret that I kept buried for so very long was that in my family, around the dinner table at my grandparents' home, I was taught racism. I was taught that white people were better and that Black people were to be feared and to be mistrusted. The privilege that my skin color afforded me, combined with the racism that I was taught as a child, it meant that I never examined why I could play sports with Black teammates, but we couldn't swim at the same swimming pool or live in the same neighborhoods or socialize outside of school. When I graduated from college, my first job was as a teacher in Birmingham City. I taught at A.H. Parker High School, a historically Black high school in Birmingham. And for the first time in my life, I was the minority in the room. For the first time in my life, my skin color, it didn't afford me the privilege to look away from the racism that was so very prevalent in the community that I lived in. And I couldn't look away from racism anymore. I couldn't look away from the racism that I was taught. It was there at Parker High School. It was there that my education began. It was there that I started to deconstruct my grandfather's false teachings. It was there that I began to peel back the layers to uncover my unconscious bias. And my students, they were my teachers. It was there at Parker that I gained an education. I've come to realize that the best gift I was ever given was the strength to admit that family secret of racist teaching. I think it's a gift because it's when our secrets come out into the light that we can examine them, and I'm examining that secret, and I'm able to enter into deeper and more faithful learnings about our history. I'm able to now open myself to really difficult and challenging conversations. I'm learning the power to walk in more faithful ways with my siblings as we seek to follow Jesus. I still stumble. I still have so much left to learn. I've got more work to do. We've got more work to do. We white folks, we've got so much more work to do.
I remember early, as a young child, realizing that I was not equal, nor was I privileged. I remember when we would go with our grandmother to the doctor, and right after she would finish with her doctor visit, we would go to the 5 and dime store. And as we would enter the store, the lady standing behind the counter would always make a comment when we entered. Annie, watch your children and don't let them touch my merchandise. And that was very confusing to me. So needless to say, we didn't buy anything in that store from that day forward. It just gave me the sense as I grew older that we were always labeled as someone that might touch things that we shouldn't have, or even pick things up that we shouldn't have, to the point where we were accused of stealing things. It was when I was 10 years old that I had my very personal encounter with this. A lady in the community wanted me to come and wash her dishes every Saturday. Well, this particular Saturday, she came and picked me up, dropped me off, etc. And she returned right after lunch, and my dad went to the door and she said, "Your daughter has stolen the ring that my dead husband gave me." And he came and got me. He says, "Did you see her ring?" And I said, "No, sir." And he said, "Well, hop in the truck. We'll go look for it." And when I got to her house, my dad didn't bother to go through the back door. He went straight through the front door, and he went straight to the kitchen. And where she had washed, I suppose, her lunch dishes, the ring was laying right there on the sink. And I remember him looking at her and saying, "My daughter did not steal your ring. Here is your ring right here." We were labeled as children as being thieves. At 10 years old, I wouldn't even know what to do with a diamond ring. I mean, I never saw it. I never touched it. But because she misplaced it, I couldn't remember where she had put it, she automatically assumed that I had taken her ring. And she made no apologies. We left, and I never went back to her house to do her dishes.
Systematic racism comes in so many forms. that I don't think we actually think about how it's a part of the fabric of our everyday lives. But one of the main issues that have really been at my heart or feeding me or irritating me at the moment, I think that's probably the best word, is this healthcare disparities. So often we think of healthcare disparities as being whether or not you have affordable health care or access to health care, but what we don't spend a lot of time thinking about is the quality of health care. I would say about 3 years ago, well, it's definitely 3 years ago, I was with my last child. I was pregnant at the very end, and things weren't going right. And when I say things weren't going right, I started feeling that I was having a lot of serious complications, and I started talking to my doctors and nurse practitioner. And what happened was, it's like everyone kind of bounced me around or bounced around what I had to say, and it really was neglected, dismissed until I finally got a doctor who finally decided that, okay, yes, I'm overdue. Let's go ahead and induce. So here comes induction day. I'm there getting ready to have this beautiful baby girl, and all of a sudden I scream, I can't see. And she's like, okay, it's okay, you're fine. And I'm like, no, it's not okay, I can't see. And from there, everything just started going totally, completely out of control. I my blood pressure elevated so greatly that they were struggling to calm me, struggling to get my blood pressure down, using different medications. Things weren't working. It was just totally, completely out of control. And for me, what was so pervasive in my mind was that I can't see. I was terrified. And when I finally got someone to really pay attention to the fact that indeed I couldn't see, it'll come back soon. Well, a week later, I still didn't have my eyesight. Everything was still just a blur. I couldn't see things clearly. I couldn't tell one person from another other than their voice, because everyone was just like blob objects. And finally, my doctor listened and said, okay, we're going to get you an ophthalmologist. And I get to the ophthalmologist, and he says, you have permanent retina damage. I'm like, what? He was like, yes, I'm going to send you to a specialist, and here we go. A long story short, at the end of this, we realized that my blood pressure indeed became so elevated and that my retinas became swollen. And that was the reason why I couldn't see. It took almost 6 weeks or more for my eyes to heal to the point where I can actually see. I have permanent damage where I don't see the way I used to see, but overall I can see. It wasn't even the worst part of the story. I also ended up having to have a blood transfusion at the very last minute before I walked out of the hospital for discharge, because all of a sudden everything, all the complaints and things I kept asking about when it came to my blood count and my anemia was like so low that the doctor felt like if I didn't get a blood transfusion at that moment that I could have died. I say this to say that so often African Americans are dismissed. Our complaints are often underwritten as some other ailment or something that may not necessarily be related, or just totally not given a true voice in our medical care. I had someone advocating with me, an actual healthcare professional with me most of the way, and they still didn't listen to what I had to say until essentially almost too late. And that's not okay. It's not okay that African American women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die from childbirth than any other race. And it's 100% preventable.
My first experiences with racism as a young adult came when my family adopted my brother Carlos. Now, at the time, Carlos was a year older than I was and came to America because he needed heart surgery. He was going to return home to Honduras afterward, but we found out that the medication Carlos needed to live would not be readily available for him. So my family decided to adopt Carlos so he could become a legal resident of the United States and receive the care that he needed. Needless to say, I was thrilled to finally have a brother. However, when people saw us, it was quite clear that we were different, which led to some funny and some not so funny experiences. I can still remember Carlos being followed by a manager in a clothing store when my mother took us school shopping. The manager didn't even try to hide what she was doing, and I certainly was not being followed. When my mother intervened, the manager seemed shocked that Carlos was her child. I can also remember how he was treated at school. If people did not know that Carlos had a white family, he was always treated differently. And I can remember my anger and my frustration at this fact. To me, Carlos was simply my brother, but to the world he was something different. This led me on a long journey of understanding that I was treated differently as people of color. I had avenues open to me that they simply did not. And I wondered why our country, that I had been taught was built on the ideals of justice and equality for all, did not live up to this model. And so that's when I began learning about the concept of white privilege. Now, I understand that the term white privilege can be problematic for many people because of the connotations. The word white creates discomfort among those who are not used to being identified by their race. And the word privilege, especially for poor and rural people, sounds like a word that just doesn't belong to them, a word that suggests that they have never struggled. This defensiveness, however, cannot stop the conversation. So examples might be like when I was with my brother in a grocery store and noticed there was a very tiny section labeled ethnic food with the foods that he was used to, whereas the whole grocery store was filled with items that I was used to. Other examples might include white people are less likely to be followed, interrogated, or searched by law enforcement officers because they look suspicious. White people's skin tone will not be a reason people hesitate to trust their credit or financial responsibility. If white people are accused of a crime, they're less likely to be presumed guilty, less likely to be sentenced to death, and more likely to be portrayed in a fair, nuanced manner by media outlets. These are only a few examples. The most important lesson is that white privilege is not just a subconscious byproduct of past discrimination. It is the purposeful results of racism that allows for the constant recreation of inequality. It's important for white allies to share what we have learned about white privilege. We have to push through our fear and discomfort and demand courageous conversations in our churches, in our families, and in our social circles. We cannot let our peers get away with problematic remarks without making a serious effort to engage them. We are called to work with our sisters and brothers of color to make the world a better place and to build the kingdom of God here on earth. But in order to do this, we have to face the difficult decisions of the past. We must actively combat racism. We must work to change the present so that we all can have a wondrous future.
As a Black pharmacist, I deal with those coming to the table or coming to the counter. Where's the pharmacist? And they think that I'm the technician, and I have to tell them that I'm the pharmacist, or I have to continue to justify and prove my position over and over again. Recently, I had to partner with a supervisor for another position that was in the pharmacy. And how she treated my employees up under her supervision and myself was very different from how she treated the white employees or another white pharmacist. She painted herself as the victim until I was bold and brave enough to call it out for what it was. And it was just pure, unadulterated racism. She continued to pick and to nag and to bother and to just continually pick with me. So when the conversation finally came up between myself, the other supervisor, and my supervisor, which my supervisor is a black woman, and I brought the word racism up, I got called and basically questioned about, oh no, you can't bring that word up. You can't bring the R word up. HR takes that very serious. You can't bring that up. And it diminished my pain. It diminished what I was feeling. But I stood on my truth. And I am here today to tell someone that it is very real. My son is only 2. I worry now, when he turns 15 or 16 years old, is he gonna come back through the door? This is a very real issue. And in order for us to overcome the systemic racism, we have to pull the Band-Aid off the sore. So I beg of you, please, please, let's confront these issues together head on.